All right, there we go. We are live. Good to see you this morning. Um, just a little disclaimer here. We are not going to cover the Epstein stuff this morning. I'll be honest with you, as I've been reading into it and looking into it, um, it's horrible. It is horrible. This is Katie Johnson when she was 13 years old. She's one of the women. There are a lot of women making these similar allegations. It's come out that what they're saying is that Epstein would recruit these young women under false pretenses, pay them a couple $100. Then when they would show up, he would rape them and then tell them, because I paid you to be here and you had sex, you're now a prostitute and you committed a crime. And then would blackmail them. And it gets way worse than that. It does. It just gets way worse than that. What they did when they blackmailed them, how they forced them to recruit other young women by threatening to turn them in. It's really horrific. And I'll be honest with you, every time I get into it and I see the allegation, I just get furious. So today we're going to talk about the Supreme Court in detail. It is really interesting. It is fascinating. It is beyond fascinating. It is actually terrifying. And but stick with me to the end. It's going to get a little dark, but it will, believe me, there will be light at the end. So let's do this. Fill your cups, grab a pen and paper. So if we have room for a round table at the end, I'd love to see your questions. Let's do this. All right, before we move on to the Supreme Court, I've got this comment right here from Greg Edmond. They are liars and perjurers. Sir, if you are talking about the people, the young women making these allegations, you don't know shit. And if that is the allegation you're making, you're nothing but a troll, and I will ban you from this channel. So just clarify it so we can get that over with. To start with, this discussion about the Supreme Court, I would really like to frame it so that you can see the big picture. Gotcha. You're talking about SCOTUS. Thank you. That's why I checked with you. I used to get mad and just ban people. Sometimes I would go after the wrong people. Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that. Let's start with this.
So what, in a sense, you're saying is that there are certain situations, and the Houston plan, or that part of it was one of them, where the president can decide that it's in the best interest of the nation or something, and do something illegal.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
By definition.
Exactly.
We were horrified by that statement. We spent decades making sure that was not true. We did. We absolutely. Do you agree with that? That if the president does it, then by definition, it's not illegal? You folks in the chat. I think anyone that watches that statement and sees a president make that statement immediately recoils, and they know fundamentally that is wrong. That is not true. Sherry Foster, thanks for the comment. I am running on my own today, so I won't be able to put all the comments up. I just want to tell you right now in the beginning, thank you very much for the support. We've got a lot of information to cover, and thank you very much. If you disagree with the Supreme Court, type I dissent. Pretty please. Yes, do that. That is a good thing. That is a good thing. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you for the gnomes. Marcia's the one that sent me the gnomes back. I love gnomes. Those are great. Those are fantastic. They watch the show with us every time. Folks, I think we can all agree that no. I mean, that immediately makes you recoil. You don't have to think about that. You don't really have to legally parse it out. We know that's just wrong. The minute you hear it, you know it's wrong. But that is exactly what the Supreme Court just did. That is exactly what the Supreme Court just did. And to really understand why and where we're coming from, we got to jump in the Wayback Machine. I want you folks will remember, you're well-informed people. You'll know who this is. There is now a verb, a transitive verb, borking, to be borked, because of this man right here, Robert Bork. And what it means is that, fair or unfair, when you come up for an interview and a hearing or whatever for a job, you're not going to get it. By any means necessary, you're not going to get it. They went back and looked at everything. This was back in the 80s, back in the say no to drugs era and all that nonsense, that idiocy. And I mean, they even went after him with, you smoked dope, didn't you? You smoked the grass. You smoked the grass. Shout out to my Texas Paul pot heads that aren't talking about coffee pots. Yeah, that's what it means to be borked. Fair or unfair, you are not getting this job. They tried to put him on the Supreme Court. And the reason Democrats said no was because on October 20th, 1973, Robert Bork made the worst mistake of his life. He changed his life forever. That is the date that we colloquially call the Saturday Night Massacre. And not to get too far out in the weeds, but Attorney General Elliott was fired for refusing to fire Archibald Cox, a special prosecutor that was looking into Watergate. Then his deputy attorney general also refused, and they fired him. Finally, they got to the Solicitor General, Robert Bork, and he said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I'll do it. And he fired Archibald Cox. That didn't work out too well. People were horrified by it. Just horrified. And it ended up with Archibald Cox eventually being replaced with Leon Jaworski. We've had Leon Jaworski's son, Joe Jaworski, on the show before. He ran for Attorney General here in Texas. Hopefully he will again. A good man. Friend of the show. But yeah, what that was about was a view of the presidency called the Unitary Executive. And before we get too deep into those weeds, let me give you this. This is where Republicans were for the longest time. And this is why, and I've got a confession to make. I was wrong about the Supreme Court decision. I absolutely told you, don't worry about it. This isn't going to happen. They are never going to give Joe Biden immunity because this ends every investigation into Joe Biden. It does. It just effectively ends every investigation they want to run into Joe Biden. Because it doesn't matter, because he's got immunity for anything. And when I say anything, I mean anything. They're trying to say, well, it's official acts, but we're going to get into it. We're going to get into it. They literally mean anything. Peter Campbell says, all laws require voluntary compliance. One decides if they want to obey, knowing that you may lose your freedom and your treasure if you don't. This flies in the face of our rule. Yeah, it does. It does. This is Grover Norquist, and this is where Republicans were for decades. And this is why I got it wrong. I just look at where people are, what they say, and what they do, and I weigh that. I don't usually, I don't let my feelings really get involved. So I said, look, there's no way Republicans are going to do this. Why? Because they've been saying this for decades. This is Grover Norquist. Every Republican that got elected forever would sign a pledge to this man's organization that they would not raise taxes ever. He was one of the Washington, D.C.'s biggest power brokers. He said this. He was the guy that said that he wanted to shrink the government down to the size of a baby and then drown it in a bathtub. He also said this. Oops, 1 second.
Stop. We don't need someone to think it up or design it. We have a House and a Senate. The leadership now for the modern conservative movement for the next 20 years will be coming out of the House and the Senate. So focus on electing the most conservative Republican who can win in each House seat and the most conservative Republican who can win in each Senate seat. And then pick a Republican with enough working digits to handle a pen to become president of the United States.
Yeah, that's been the Republican point of view for decades. We want a weak president that'll just do what Congress tells him. That's why they've had this huge push in Congress constantly, and the judiciary for that matter, to get judges in, because they didn't believe in a strong executive. They were not believers in the unitary executive. Well, that's changed. That's changed. Remember Kevin Patrick? We talked about him in the recent show. I've told you, I believe, I am not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I have never diagnosed the man. I've never sat down with the man. But from the things he says, I believe this man is insane. Just my personal opinion. He is a religious zealot, and he fancies himself a historian. His degrees are in history, but as he goes through this, you're going to have to forgive me. I'm going to stop this video a few times, and forgive me. It's a 3-minute long video. But I am going to stop it a few times to correct a few things. I hate historians as a general rule. I love history, but I hate historians. They are the worst scientists. In fact, they'll tell you they're not scientists. They said they use scientific methods, but they're not scientists. Because they always put their personal spin on everything instead of just sticking to the scientific method and what's right and wrong. He does it huge here. Let me just let you see what I'm talking about. And again, forgive me, we're going to stop this a couple times as we go through it, but this is horrific.
And so on these most critical times and critical issues concerning the Constitution, there is no one better in this world. There's no better man, a Christian friend.
All right. First stop. Look at all the religious iconography in the background. There are some really great takes out there if you do a search about why the right wing shrouds itself in religion. Why it's constantly there. There is a historic precedence. There is a technique for this. Hitler did this. They were good. It was written on their belts, for Christ's sake. The Nazis had it written on their belts that they were anointed by God, that God was behind them. Every time you see a dictator or a fascist, God loves them according to them. So yeah, that's the first thing. All the religious iconography in the background.
And for time, someone who's a fierce follower of the Constitution, it's our honor to welcome Kevin Roberts to the show. And Kevin, if you just want to freewheel it and respond to those clips and tell folks what the Heritage Foundation is doing to protect the rule of law and to protect individuals in this great country. Pleasure to have you on.
Well, Professor, my great friend, thanks for filling in and doing a great job. Three things. Number one, in spite of all this nonsense from the left, we are going to win. We're in the process of taking this country back. No one in the audience should be despairing. No one should be discouraged. We ought to be really encouraged by what happened yesterday. And in spite of all of the injustice, which of course, friends and audience of this show.
Yeah, he's talking about the Supreme Court ruling. That's why this is relevant today. He's saying, oh, we're going to win. Look at what we did yesterday in the Supreme Court. They're not going to win. They aren't.
Of our friend Steve No, we are going to prevail. Number two, to the point of the clips, and of course your preview of the fact that I am an early American historian and love the Constitution, that Supreme Court ruling yesterday on immunity is vital. And it's vital for a lot of reasons, but I would go to Federalist number 70 if people in the audience are looking for something to read over Independence Day weekend, in addition to rereading the Declaration of Independence. Read Hamilton.
Okay, let me stop you right there. This is a common thing among people that want to really seem smart. They say, well, go back and read the Federalist Papers. In this case, he references Federalist number 70. Well, that number 70 talks about the unitary executive, the need for a strong centralized executive. Folks, the Federalist Papers are what we call an op-ed today. It was three guys, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison, that wrote essays. They wrote op-eds and sent them into newspapers. That's what the Federalist Papers are. They were not part of the formation of our country. The only reason they come into play is when there's a legally vague question. They will go back to the Federalist Papers and read what these guys said previously to try to get an idea what was in their head. Which is iffy. If you ask me, not everybody that writes an op-ed keeps the same frame of mind. The way our government was founded is they had conventions. Like there was a Philadelphia Convention in 1780s. That's how our government was formed. It was guys sitting down across from each other and negotiating things out. And it is not from the point of view that he is presenting here. Federalist number 70 was not represented in the formation of our government. It just wasn't. Virginia came to the table with a proposal for a mild. Remember, we just overthrew a monarchy. We weren't looking for another monarchy like this guy represents here. We just were not looking for a strong, centralized, unitary executive in the definition that he has. Unitary executive is a spectrum. The idea, the theory is a spectrum. What came to the table was not this. What came to the table was a weakened executive. The other end of the table was the New Jersey proposal, where they said, we don't want an executive at all. We want a council, a group, a weak group. That was the New Jersey proposal. So yeah, he is misportraying here history to his stupid, idiotic followers. And it just drives me up the wall whenever anybody says, well, look at the Federalist Papers. Why? It's an op-ed. Have you seen how stupid op-eds are today? They weren't any better back then. Anyways, let's continue on.
Hamilton's number 70, because there, along with some other essays, he talks about the importance of a vigorous executive. You know, former congressman, the importance of Congress doing its job, but we also know the importance of the executive being able to do his job. And can you imagine, Dave Bratt, any president, put politics off to the side, any president having to second guess, triple guess every decision they're making in their official capacity? You couldn't have the republic that you just described. But number three.
Yes. Yes, I can imagine every president giving thought. It's not second guessing. It is thinking about what you're doing. Listen to what that man just said. Well, we can't have a president that second guesses if something's legal or illegal. The hell we can't. That has to be part of the deliberation before action is taken. And yes, we have proven that, yes, we can function just fine without a fascist dictatorship. Listen to what he is telling you. He is pushing this unitary executive theory, and we're going to get to why here in just a second. This unitary executive theory, there's just the 100% opposite. You heard Grover Norquist and what the Republicans represented for decades. Well, we don't need a strong executive. We don't need that at all. We got Congress. Now it's, oh, well, we've got to have the most extreme version of the unitary executive. But let's continue on.
Let me speak about the radical left. You and I have both been parts of faculties and faculty senates and
when anybody like this says, let me tell you about the left, you're about to be covered in bullshit. They know nothing about us and what we think and what we do. Nothing.
Understand that the left has taken over our institutions. The reason that they are apoplectic right now, the reason that so many anchors on MSNBC, for example, are losing their minds daily is because our side is winning. And so I come full circle in this response and just want to encourage you with some substance that we are in the process of the Second American Revolution.
Okay, a bombshell is going off right here, and I want to stop it before he says it and address this whole, the left, why we're losing our minds. We're losing our minds because the Supreme Court, the more I have dug into this, it is worse than what we thought. It is way worse than what we thought. We are losing our minds because, this is horrific. This is fascism. It is insane what the Supreme Court just said. And thank God, if you look at the corporate media, they're figuring it out. They're figuring it out. Yeah. This has nothing to do with you're winning. You're not winning. In fact, we're winning. You know, you guys love to talk about polls and this, that, and the other. Well, every poll says we're winning. That is just a message that you hear all the time from them. Thanks for this. I appreciate the support, Christina. Thank you very much, Christy. Thank you very much. That is what you hear. Mr. Knutson in the house. Glad to see you, man. You love our European audience, man. We really do. This is Mr. Knutson. Asbjorn Knutson is in Norway, my friends. Yeah, no, we're not losing our minds because you're winning. We're losing our minds because you're destroying our democracy. But let's continue.
Process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
Now let's back that up so you can hear that one more time.
Side is winning. And so I come full circle in this response and just want to encourage you with some substance that we are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
No, you are not in the process of a second American Revolution. You're in the process of a civil war. You're in the process of making one of the most horrific men to ever sit in the White House a king. And no, it will not be bloodless. No, it will not be. I told you that man is insane. I believe 100%. It is my personal opinion. That man is insane. And he runs the Heritage Foundation, which wields insane amounts of power in the Republican establishment. Just insane amounts of power. So let's talk about the Unitary executive and why this is happening now. Well, you saw Grover Norquist talking about, well, we need a weak executive. We don't need a strong executive. Now you hear just the opposite. Oh, well, we've got to have the Federalist number 70s. We got to have the Unitary executive, the strong Unitary executive. Why? What changed? Doesn't make sense, does it? I mean, it's diametrically opposed. Same party. It makes sense if you look at the political parties as what they are. They're storefronts. They're storefronts. You have the Democratic Party that represents the people. They represent our best interests. Again, government just does what you cannot do for yourselves. Meet inspections, build roads, defense. You cannot personally defend a nation. So we do it. We coalesce together, and that's what they do. The Republican Party is run by and services billionaires. It's what they do. Every time you see them pretend to do something for the people, it's always just a shiny object. It's filled with crap. It's a distraction while they do things like pass massive tax cuts for billionaires. This doesn't make any sense until you look at it that way. Billionaires funded Grover Norquist to try to take Congress and force their agenda through. Didn't work. It didn't work. People looked at their policies and said, no. Well, they didn't give up. They didn't give up at all. After decades of trying to hobble the presidency, they said, screw it. Screw democracy. Screw democracy. These people are screwing with our plans. Your idea of how our nation should be run, servicing the people, is screwing up our billionaire agenda. So screw that. Screw that. And I'm not kidding, folks. This is at CPAC. This is the Republican Party. Their big convention every year. You'll recognize Steve Bannon on the left, and this is Jack Posobiec talking. Jack Posobiec is a Republican strategist. He is the guy that ended up bringing us Pizzagate, shoved QAnon up their butts and made them all crazy.
All right, welcome. I just wanted to say, look, welcome to the end of democracy. We're here to overthrow it completely. We didn't get all the way there on January 6th, but we will endeavor to get rid of it and replace it with this right here. We'll replace it with this right here.
Amen.
What he's holding up is a cross. You can't really see it because of his jacket. It's black and it blends into his jacket. What he's holding up is a cross, which is exactly what they've done, right? I mean, the overturning of abortion is all about Christianity and that Christian nationalism. I showed you I drew your attention to the religious iconography in the background. They are utilizing Christian nationalism for this. One more time. It's a short video, 18 seconds.
All right, welcome. I just wanted to say, look, welcome to the end of democracy. We're here to overthrow it completely. We didn't get all the way there on January 6th, but we will endeavor to get rid of it and replace it with this right here. We'll replace it.
They're telling you. They're telling you to your face. And you're saying, well, it doesn't make sense. Well, it doesn't make sense unless you look at who is running this cabal. It's not Trump. Trump's an idiot. He's just a selfish little disgusting boy. There are power brokers behind these people. Harlan Crow, the guy that bought Clarence Thomas. That guy collects Nazi memorabilia. Yeah, he's got a private collection of Nazi memorabilia. The people in his class have decided this democracy shit isn't working. We tried to take over Congress, and we couldn't take over Congress because you people. So to hell with democracy. And that's what the Supreme Court just did. They came out with this decision, which is part and parcel to the 2025 project, which blatantly tells you to your face that they want to gut government and have a strong unitary. When I say strong, I mean a fascist dictatorship, unitary executive. That's code speak for fascism. And they're telling you to your face, folks. They're telling you to your face. And when I say the SCOTUS ruling was worse, far worse than we thought, the more we dig into it, it just keeps getting worse. Normally what happens is that we get a ruling like this, everybody gets really upset, and then we read into the details, and we're like, okay, this is bad, but it's not as bad as we originally thought. It's going to be okay. No, this one keeps getting worse. You remember this guy? This is Jeffrey Clark. He's the guy that answers his door in his underwear. What they said in this ruling was that the conversation, they didn't define what the president's core duties were. They stayed away from that. And I'll explain why in a moment. But they intentionally went to gut the cases against Donald Trump. And John Roberts specifically mentions this situation right here. If you remember, Jeffrey Clark was a douchebag stooge at the DOJ. And Trump threatened to have his own Saturday Night Massacre. He was going to fire the attorney general and make Jeffrey Clark the head of the DOJ. Every manager in the DOJ stood up and said, we will resign en masse. We will shut the Department of Justice down, period, and it will be your fault. You cannot do this. And Trump backed down. And Trump backed down. This is part of the evidence presented in the case against Trump, that he attempted to do this in the furtherance of his coup. It is part of the evidence. John Roberts in the Supreme Court just said, no, you can talk about that. That you cannot even look at that. That the President of the United States can absolutely discuss utilizing the Department of Justice in the furtherance of a crime, a coup, an attempt to overthrow an election, because he's president. Not only can he do that and you not prosecute him for that, you can't even use the discussions as evidence. Kim, thanks for the support. I really appreciate you. Y'all keep the lights on around here. Y'all keep things moving. Dems must win both chambers and limit the Supreme Court's power and jurisdiction to do more damage. Yes, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. So yeah, as we read into this, it gets worse and worse and worse. And they created in this ruling essentially a legal death loop for any prosecution going forward. And when I say any prosecution, I mean any prosecution of a Republican. J.D. Vance said the quiet part out loud. The senator from Ohio came out and said, yeah, this ruling's fantastic. The president has immunity, but not Joe Biden. But not Joe Biden. He said that, folks. He said that out loud. And the Republican Supreme Court actually set that up. Yeah, they intentionally did not frame anything that they're asserting. They gave no examples except for examples that attacked specifically the cases against Trump. So you know what their motivation was. And in doing that, they created, like I said, it's a legal death loop. Whenever you try to prosecute a Republican, and as J.D. Vance said, this doesn't apply to Joe Biden or basically any Democrat. This is only Republican. They can say, as Trump already has done since this ruling came out, he's came out and asserted that his attempted coup was, part of his job. That was part of my core duties. So whenever you charge them with a crime, they simply say that was part of my core duties. And since Robert used such a ridiculous assertion, Jeffrey Clark, literally everything's on the table. So you charge them with a crime. They say, oh no, I have immunity for this, whatever subject, whatever. And they'll take one piece of evidence at a time. And they'll say, no, I have immunity because of this. The judge will say, no, you don't. They will appeal it. They will appeal it again to a full panel. And then it'll go to the Supreme Court, who will delay it. As they did this, they delayed this to the last possible day. And then they will do what they did with this ruling and kick it back to the judge. This goes back to Judge Chutkan. Every single piece of evidence will go through that process. It will take 50 years to effectively prosecute a Republican president, no matter what the crime. Like I said, it just keeps getting worse and worse as we read it. They literally did that, folks. There is no feasible way now to actually prosecute a president because of that reality. Because of that reality. That it takes time. Your average president would be dead from old age before any of these cases were complete. And they knew it when they did it. And I've got to tell you, the defenses of this coming from MAGA are insane. They're just mind-numbingly stupid. And not just this decision. I mean, all of the decisions that have come out in the last few days have just been insane. We give you an example here. This is talking about the homelessness ruling The defensive, there's just, again, I told you about filling the space. People only have so much bandwidth to take in information. So they are burying their supporters who will believe anything they say in complete nonsense so nothing can seep through. I want you to hear this. This is their defense of the crime to be homeless ruling, to use a colloquial example of it. This is the National Review, a right-wing rag. This is their defense of it, and this is spreading out all over social media. In fact, it says here, the Supreme Court did not make it a, quote, crime to be homeless, unquote. In Johnson, that's the case, the court held that it is not a violation of the Eighth Amendment prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment for local governments to simply enforce laws against sleeping and camping in public places. That's homelessness. That's homelessness. Sleeping and camping in public places. That's homelessness. You know, we're not talking about camping trips. This case was never about camping trips. You know, you going out to the park and camping and, you know, no. This was about homelessness, about homeless people sleeping on the streets. Is it a crime or is it not? They're saying, oh, no, they didn't say that homelessness was a crime. They just simply said that, you know, homelessness is a crime. And let me tell you how stupid this is and why the billionaires class are just, it costs $120,000 a year in the state of California to house a convict. $120,000 a year. You could pay these convicts $70,000 a year. And 60 to 70% of it, this is just true. It's just studies that show that when a convict gets out and they have income and a job and a home, they just don't, the recidivism rate plummets. It's just the way it is. You could take and pay these people $60,000, $70,000 a year, create a job, invent a job, and put them to work, and crime would drop by 60 to 70%. But billionaires will not allow that. That doesn't feel like control. That doesn't feel like control. That feels like you're taking something from me and giving it to a guy over here, which is exactly what we're doing. It just makes more sense than locking people in prison, because that is the worst possible outcome. It creates the worst possible outcomes. You're spending $120,000 a year for the worst possible outcomes. We could take $50,000 a year, $40,000 a year, just invent jobs for these people, put them to work, and crime would virtually 60 to 70% of crime would vanish overnight. It would. We believe in doing it after wars. When wars are over and we have a huge workforce coming back that don't have jobs waiting for them, what do? We immediately just create jobs. We built our national highway infrastructure that way. But we won't do it for homelessness, because for billionaires, that doesn't feel like control. That feels like you're taking something from me. And they control the Republican Party. That's who the Republican Party serves. And this SCOTUS ruling about immunity is exactly the same thing. Exactly. It is them saying, this democracy stuff's not working. We just need control. We just need control. And you've got people like Jim Jordan, perfect example of he is a perfect Republican. When students were being raped, when wrestlers in his, that he was a coach for, were being raped by a doctor in his own showers, he protected the university, not the student. That's exactly what you want if you're a billionaire. That's exactly what you want if you're a billionaire. You want a Jim Jordan. And I got to tell you, folks, Kentucky Fried Comer. How did they get these people? Really simple. Before, and I've always told you, it's good to be in Congress. There are a lot of perks in Congress. Kentucky Fried Comer, he was a rancher in Kentucky. He didn't eat Wagyu beef. Truffles weren't in his diet before he got to Congress. He flew coach before politics paid off for him. Now he flies private. And that's how cheaply these billionaires bought the Republican Party. The cost difference between a coach ticket and flying somebody private is all it costs. What's the net result? You got 10 guys that hold more wealth than half of the world. More than trillions, hundreds of millions, hundreds of billions of people. 10 guys. And what did it cost them? They didn't have to buy these guys jets. No, they just let them fly on jets. Bohemian Grove, it's a nice place, but it ain't that nice. But for old Clarence Thomas, it's a taste of the good life. So they own them. They own them. You ever seen that yacht that Clarence Thomas was taking those trips on? That ain't that nice. It really isn't. I mean, I'm telling you, these billionaires have much nicer yachts. Betsy DeVos has 10. Eric Prince and Betsy DeVos, that family, yeah, they've got 10 yachts. And they bought Clarence Thomas for trips on an old yacht. Another defense they're coming up with is, well, they didn't really give the president anything special. All they did was give him the same immunity Congress has. That's all over social media. That's crap. That is not true. The more we read into this, the more horrific it gets. But let's just assume for a second, just play along with them and say, okay, that is a true statement, which it isn't. It is not. A congressman and a president are not the same thing. They are not the same thing. They just aren't. There's no way that you can come up with parity with immunity between the two. Let me explain. A congressman calls up and says, hey, there's a terrorist, calls up the Pentagon, says, there's a terrorist. I want him dead. Pentagon will say, don't ever call me again. The president picks up the phone and says, hey, I got intelligence. There's a terrorist at his house. I want him dead. Pentagon will say, yeah, we've got that intelligence. His house, his family and his grandchildren, everybody's in that house. Are you sure? Yeah, I want him dead. Well, he picked that location for a reason, right? I mean, that house is across the street from a school. Are you sure? Yeah, I want him dead. Okay. There's a hospital down the block. Did I stutter? What do you think happens in that situation? The next morning, that terrorist is dead. And it doesn't matter what the damage around it was, because the Pentagon will do what the president says. So no, there is no parity between the immunity for a president and the immunity for a congressperson. There is no parity between the two. You know, this is the kind of stuff that a congressperson abuses their immunity for. They do hold immunity. This is why Marjorie Trader Greene feels comfortable libeling and slandering people and lying about people, because you can't touch her. She's got immunity. You know, here she is holding up a picture in a completely unrelated hearing of Hunter Biden naked in a sex act. If you did that in public, that's a crime. That is a crime. I'm not even talking about the civil ramifications. I'm talking about that's just a straight up crime. But she did it multiple times. Why? Because she has immunity, because of the speech and debate clause. They're trying to say a president's ability to discuss decapitating the DOJ using the Department of Justice in the furtherance of a coup, that's what Jeffrey Clark was supposed to do, was supposed to issue official government opinions saying that these fake slates of electors were the real slates of electors. That's what he was supposed to do. John Roberts in the Supreme Court just said, no harm, no foul. That's the president doing his job. For which you know is bullshit. This was about a re-election. This was about a coup. This was about somebody that lost an election and refused and tried to commit a coup to stay in power, and had members of Congress absolutely aiding and abetting him. Another defense they're putting up is that, oh, well, you know, Congress, there's impeachment. There's impeachment. No, there isn't. You just said that you cannot use anything that he does as evidence, for one. And this is the second problem with impeachment. Impeachment is an inherently political act. Guess what Republicans do now? We just had an impeachment. Senate Republicans admitted to microphones and the American people they knew Trump was guilty. But they voted to acquit him anyways. Why? Politics. So yeah, that is another one they're making, another argument they're making. Oh, no, this wasn't, you know, there's nothing to fear here because, you know, we could always have impeachment as a remedy. Well, we don't have impeachment as a remedy. They told you. They told you. We know he's guilty. We're not going to impeach. Why? Because he's our guy. So here we go. What's the fallout from this? Well, this has been the first fallout. Judge Juan Merchan is a straight shooter. And when this ruling came out, they delayed Trump's sentencing that's supposed to happen. It was supposed to happen a little over a week from today. They postponed it till September. Why? Because this ruling says they can't use what the man did as evidence. Even though it's a state case, even though it has to do with behavior that was really before he was president. Some of it continued on after he was president, but the majority of the crime was before he was even president. This ruling is so off the wall, over the top, granting immunity and kingly status, that they have to stop and say, we don't know that we can actually apply the law. This is insane, people. And this is what they want to do with it. Now, the audio on this is not great because it was recorded from about 10 feet away. The video is fantastic, but the audio, put your phone up to your ear, turn your volume up. I'm going to stop talking. I'm not going to talk during this. Listen to this. This is who they just worked to save from prosecution and make a king.
Are we close to seeing Mr. Kim here at the White House?
Could happen. I mean,
They talked about that yesterday.
1 second. Here we go.
Are we close to seeing Mr. Kim here at the White House?
could happen. I mean,
They talked about that yesterday.
I would
with
have,
Mike
yeah, I think it's something that could happen. Yeah. Hey, he's the head of a country, and I mean, he's the strong head. Don't let anyone think anything different.
Right.
He speaks, and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the
Right.
same.
Well, are we close to?
So there's Donald Trump talking to Steve Ducey, you know, when he doesn't know he's on camera, telling you exactly the way he feels. If you couldn't hear it, what he says there is he's talking about Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea, and how when Kim Jong-un talks, everybody must sit up. That's what he wants. That's what he wants. And you can hear it for yourself. Feel free to go back and get it. He's telling Steve Ducey from Fox News, hey, this is what I want. I want my people to sit up when I talk. This is what else he wants. This is all over the right wing. Elizabeth Cheney is guilty of treason because she dared investigate the coup. Retruth, because this is on Truth Social, if you want televised military tribunals for her treason. Retruth by Donald J. Trump. So yeah. Yeah, he's telling you what he wants. I'm not the one telling you. He's telling you. Let's have some military tribunals. People that dared stop my coup. And folks, you know, I need you to understand how serious this is and what this will mean. You know, I put a video out reminding people when, you know, if this happens, what you're going to see is laws passed, anti-sedition laws that will say, and it always happens. It happens in Iran. It happened in Russia, happened in Hungary. It happened in just everywhere that these dictators take power. It happened in Cambodia. It happened in Vietnam. It happened just over and over and over and over and over. North Korea, everywhere that these fascist dictators happened in Germany in 1933, they passed a whole series of laws saying you cannot criticize the government. They will do it here. They will do it here. They will do it here. And the people that report you will be your MAGA relatives It will be your MAGA relatives. It will be your MAGA coworkers and your MAGA friends that will report you for not being patriotic enough, or not going along, or not sitting up properly, or not clapping loud enough. This isn't a matter of question. This is every single time in history. Yes, like China. Just like China. Absolutely. 100%. The sedition laws will immediately follow. And they've already told you with this decision, they believe in an extreme version of the unitary executive, where basically Congress now is just for show. Why? Because they couldn't do it through Congress. We beat them. You know, I told you the last election, was a midterm election. They were supposed to decimate us. They know. You know, he sits there and says, we're winning. They're afraid because we're going to win. No, actually, they're afraid because they know they're losing. Last election was supposed to be a red wave. You know, it was an off year. Every time that happens, the party in power gets wiped out. It's just a political norm. It didn't happen. They can see the writing on the wall. They saw what happened post-Roe, the Dobbs decision. They're horrified by what's happened since Dobbs. They thought that was going to energize their base. It has cost them every single election. Everywhere that abortion is on the ballot, they lose. So they've given up. And they're now going to this radical unitary executive. They're going to make Trump a king. And then with the 2025 project, remember, folks, this is happening now. The 2025 project doesn't start on January 20th, 2025. No, that's when it ends. That's when it ends. They've got the slate of employees. They will illegally replace people in these jobs. And good luck trying to sue. Because SCOTUS just said you can't. You got one shot, folks. You got one shot. And if you think I'm kidding about your friends and families being the one to turn you in and what they're creating, folks, they had a snitch website. They said it was a crime here in the state of Texas for you to go out of the state and get what is legal in other states, healthcare that's legal in other states. So they said instead of the state going after you, they figured out a way around it, because that's illegal. If the state were to pursue you, if you went and got a legal service in another state, that's like saying, okay, we're going to have prohibition in Texas, but if you go to Louisiana and have a beer, we're going to prosecute you for what you did in Louisiana. Can't do that. Can't do that. They won't win that one as the government it is today. So what they do? They set up a bounty law. They said individuals can sue you. And they set up snitch websites. This is why they're trying to take down TikTok, folks. The folks on TikTok spread the word about their snitch website, and they just bombarded it with this is why I love you people. I love you people so much. Yeah, it was a $10,000 bounty. That's why it was called the bounty law. I love the fact that you people are so informed. They set up snitch websites. So when I tell you it's going to be your friends and your family and everything, where do you think the information came from? Who was snitching? Those people at your church. Those people at your job. That was your MAGA relatives that were turning you into this website. But God bless. This is why they want to kill TikTok. Folks on TikTok heard this. They destroyed that website. They plowed it under with fake reports so that it couldn't function until it finally crashed. It crashed a couple of times. That website's gone. Now they've moved it, and they've hidden it. They're still collecting that information. Evil Popeye here, the Attorney General here in the state of Texas, is still trying to get people's medical information from out of state. That's what happened in Germany, folks. People say, well, you can't quit talking about the Nazis, this, that, and the other. Folks, okay, talk about the Soviets. Talk about anyone. Talk about Iran. Talk about anywhere where they have done something like this. Iran's a perfect example. Look at the religious zealotry. Look at what, Jack Posobiec holding up a cross and saying, we're replacing democracy with this. Man, that's Iran. That is Iran to a T. So yeah, folks, it's worse and getting worse. The more we look into it, the worse it gets. The worse it gets. And it doesn't matter that it doesn't comport to what used to be their vision. Perfect example. This guy pretends to be a historian. He's got a PhD in history. He really does. I mean, he really does. But you can see he perverts history. You want a real taste of history? George Mason was one of the people that was on the side of the New Jersey proposal to have a council, not a unitary executive, a council, not a president. They wanted a commission. George Mason. Who's George Mason? He's the namesake of George Mason University. One of the most conservative universities in the world. They have an Antonin Scalia School of Law. How perverted has this gotten? Well, this is George Mason University today. Instead of arguing against the unitary against what George Mason himself believed, which is that we shouldn't have a centralized executive, that we shouldn't have a fascist leader. No, George Mason University was the people that were funding that were sponsoring the meetings that they were having for Eileen Cannon's getaways to Montana that were being paid for by the Federalist Society. It was George Mason University that were sponsoring this get together that they, for some reason, needed Eileen Cannon, the legal powerhouse that has no experience and no legal chops whatsoever, to come to. Can't really figure out why they needed Eileen Cannon there to be eating the finest food and living in, staying in, the finest rooms and in beautiful mountain backdrops. And, good Lord, why would the same reason they did it for Kentucky Fried Comer? It's how they buy them. It's good to be in Congress. It is. It's good to be a judge, especially if the right wing wants to buy you. Your menu gets decidedly better. And I got to tell you, folks, if you don't understand how much they serve and don't give a shit about their base, who has been one of the strongest supporters of the Republican Party? What group or faction has been one of the strongest supporters of the Republican Party, besides white supremacists? And we're talking about actual mainline, normal people within the country. Who? The military, right? I mean, the military has been staunchly Republican. Well, that same insane fool, Kevin Patrick, his organization just put their budget out. That, I told you they've got huge sway within the Republican Party. And they are gutting support for our military members in their budget. They want to cut housing allowances. They want to cut the PACT Act that has been so damn successful. Remember the burn pits in Iraq? We had people that were affected and fought and fought and fought to get benefits. They want to limit you to 10 years. Yeah, they're going after the military, folks. They're going after veterans. They want to limit veterans' ability to file disability claims. You remember how long people worked with asbestos in shipyards and in the Navy? And it was decades later that they found out it was giving them lung cancer. Well, not anymore. The Heritage Foundation said, you got 10 years. They're gutting the PACT Act. Exactly, Patricia. Exactly. Agent Orange in Vietnam. How long did it take them to prove that up? Their new budget makes all of that illegal. Because they don't fear their base at all. They don't fear their base at all. Bigotry rules all. I want to ask you, and this is what I want to close it with, folks. And thank you for sticking with me for so long. I know it's a complex subject. Why are they flying their flags upside down? What is it they are in distress about? The economy is fantastic by every measure. It's fantastic. Education, we're working on making it cheaper. They're busting their ass. They brought inflation down to normal levels. Crime is at historic lows. Employment is at historic highs. What are they in distress over? That's a legitimate question, folks. This is leading to our roundtable. I'm asking you that question. What are they in distress over? And again, this is why I love you. Bigotry. The only thing that they have lost, the only thing, and you listen to it, even comedians will talk about, by the way, I'm going to be on with Titus later this afternoon, 2:00 Central Time. Titus is not one of the comedians they're joking about this, by the way. When I talk about comedians, they talk about, oh, everybody's so sensitive. You can't make jokes. What jokes are what jokes are you making? Bigoted jokes. Everybody's so offended. Folks, that's the only thing that they've lost. That's it. We couldn't even pass a law that prevented bump stocks, a device that took a semi-automatic assault rifle and effectively turned it into a fully automatic assault rifle. What did they lose? Their corporate donors are, my God, making mega profits. Can anybody tell me what they're in distress over? Is it because somebody told them that a transgender athlete was competing that they could never find? And if they did find it, it was like 2 people in the entire country in a non-professional sport. Oh my God. The world is ending. It's bigotry, folks. And if they're that willing to sell out over their bigotry, you can bet your ass they don't give a damn that they're going to gut veterans' benefits. No. If you're an old person and you've got to choose between your Medicaid, Medicare, your veterans' benefits, or somebody tells you you're right because you hate colored people, as they like to call them, colored people, because you hate brown people, and you want to be able to say it out loud and it's okay, which one do you think they're going to take? They're going to take the bigotry every time. Every time. That's why they're saying it out loud in front of these people. So yeah, I told you we're going to end this on a positive note. We are. Yeah, the 2025 project does not start on January 20th, 2025. It ends on January 20th, 2025. They're doing it right now. This decision right now is absolutely 100% part of the 2025 project. It is allowing Trump, if he is elected, to gut our government and nobody can touch him legally. And they made themselves, the Supreme Court made themselves the ultimate arbiter of what is legal and isn't legal. And they did that so that they can enforce it against Democrats, but not against Republicans. That's the bad news. What's the good news? We have an election between now and then. We have an election between now and then. And yeah, they're going to try to cheat. They are. They are going to try and cheat their asses off. They are. They're already talking about it openly in Wisconsin. They are. They're saying, we're going to just take and do the same thing we did with the fake electors last time. We're going to do that again. But they don't control the DOJ this time. You get a shot to make sure none of this ever happens. Folks, they're not shooting their shot because they're winning. They're shooting their shot because they're losing. This is it. This is a desperate Hail Mary. This is why they feel like they're losing everything. Oh my God, I got to fly my flag upside down, because they're losing. You can make it happen. This doesn't have to happen. It doesn't. This can be a few month long blip on the radar. In the next election, no matter how red your state is, you get out there and vote and you drag everyone you know with you. People understand this. People that are not political, they understand this. Let me play this for you one more time to leave this taste in your mouth so that you understand how well we can do in this next election. Play this for people that you know that don't normally vote. Just play this for them.
So what, in a sense, you're saying is that there are certain situations, and the Houston plan, or that part of it was one of them, where the president can decide that it's in the best interest of the nation or something, and do something illegal.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
By definition.
Exactly. Exactly.
No. Even people that don't vote will vote. You show them that. You show them what they're doing. You show them. That's your job. Not just for you to vote, not just for you to work for campaigns, not for you to postcard, not for you to make phone calls, phone bank, not just for you to donate to Democrats, not just, no. Yeah. David Frost, show him the David Frost interview. It's at the Nixon Library website. Just search David Frost Nixon, and you can go to the library and show them. You get those people to the polls. The non-voters are the largest pool of voters out there that we can pull from, and we can decimate, even in red states, even in Florida, even in Texas, even in Ohio. People understand this. They understand what happened when Roe went away. They understand this ruling. It is almost universally reviled. The only people that are out there saying that they like this ruling are MAGA. That's it. Universally, everyone else despises this. Do this. Get this information out. This is what I had for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it motivated you. Let's get to work. Enjoy some Texas cities at night.